I'm sure we'd all agree that one of Haikyuu's greatest strengths is its character writing. Everyone on Karasuno is not only very well written, but has a story that's incredibly inspiring and moving. Except maybe one, or so I thought, until eventually he changed the way I saw everything. But for a long time, I couldn't see his story as anything other than brutally sad. Because there's an idea in multiple character stories of continuing to practice and put in the work, even when it doesn't seem like anything is going your way. And it works out in the end for everyone, right? Yamaguchi with his service ace, Hinata with his ball boy arc, even Takada getting Ukai to join as coach. But arguably more than anyone, it applies to the third years, who stuck with it and kept training even when Karasuno was considered an average team at best, even when their upperclassmen didn't care or they had to train outside. But because they stuck with it, it all paid off for them, and they get to fight on the court, play the game they love, and go all the way to nationals with a brilliant team. Except Sugawara, who mostly just watches from the sidelines, with his only chances to play being when he's subbed into the pinch server or when Kageyama needs to come off. Suga is reliable, experienced, and well-rounded. In 99.9% of schools, there wouldn't be a first-year setter strong enough to replace him, but unfortunately, Kageyama is just on another level entirely, and able to make the most out of Hinata too. It was a tough choice for Ukai because he too lost his place in his third year to a first year, but he has to do what's right for the team, and so Sugawara loses his starting position that he waited so long for. But let's go back to shortly before that officially happens. Karasuno has a practice match against Coach Ukai's friends. Being down a setter on the opposing team, the two must decide amongst themselves who will play for Karasuno's side and who won't. At this point in the series, they'd only had one practice game in which Kageyama had to play setter as part of the conditions Aoba Johsai set in exchange for the practice match. Being desperate for practice, they accepted it without too much discussion, but it was still very much up in the air as to which of the two would be the official setter. But Sugawara deep down already knows Kageyama is unfortunately just a better player than him, and so he sadly steps over to the opposing side, giving up his official position. The situation seems so harsh, almost cruel, but I'll come back to that because it turns out it really isn't. However, I want to talk about what Sugawara says next. Kageyama asks Suga if he's stepping down just to allow Kageyama to take the position, and says he'll refuse if so. Suga's response is completely unexpected. He says when Kageyama showed up and challenged him for the position, he was relieved. Now, remember the year previously, Karasuno lost so brutally to Date Tech that Asahi didn't get a single spike in. There's no doubt Suga feels a lot of the blame for that, especially as it resulted in Asahi leaving the club afterwards. But with Kageyama taking his place, he wouldn't have that stress, that pressure on him. We also see him mention later on that a lot of the times, teams would aim for him because of his short height. No doubt he's given up a lot of points that way, or he wouldn't have mentioned it. But these things that felt so stressful that he wished would go away, that he dreaded at the time, he ended up missing them. And it's this scene here that completely changed the way I think about so much. In the first match against Aoba Johsai, Karasuno are miles behind, and Kageyama is not his usual self. It's clear that right now, Oikawa is simply playing better than him. And so it finally happens. The moment Kageyama had been dreading, and Sugawara had been waiting for. Kageyama is subbed off, Sugawara is subbed in, and ordinarily, he likely wouldn't be able to match Oikawa, considered the strongest all-around player in the tournament. But the time he spent on the bench wasn't wasted. In the same way Hinata's ball boy arc seemed like a setback, but actually ended up being brilliant for him in the long run. Sugawara being on the sidelines allowed him to see the game more clearly, to see things he never would have noticed otherwise. And so for the next few points, Sugawara completely runs rings around Oikawa. All of his plays are read like a book, and he's even able to get Hinata his first real block on a player 10 inches taller than him. In the second set, Sugawara is able to hold his own against Oikawa, as the two teams are neck and neck for a long time, but Oikawa's serves are just as fierce as the first set, and Sugawara, whilst very reliable and solid, it eventually becomes clear to Oikawa that he's still quite readable, and short too. And so, as Aoba Johsai pull ahead, Suga can sense it. His time on the court is running out. And then, the moment that changed how I saw so much, Sugawara can feel the panic of his spikers getting blocked, the stress of his sets not working, and this time it doesn't bother him, because he knows he'll miss it as soon as he steps off. So he'll appreciate every single second whilst he can. And it suddenly hit me, how many times have I not done that? I often look back at a certain period in my life and think, oh, I miss when things were like that. Or I wish I'd done this at that time, made the most of those circumstances I had back then. And yet at the time, all I was focusing on was the problems I had, the negatives. I know it's partly because you forget the negatives when you look back, but it's also undoubtedly that I wasn't really appreciating what I had at all. And watching Sugawara go through this and begin to appreciate not only all the pressures of the court, but the time he spends on the bench too, it made me realize that he's loving all his problems, every single one, every day. And don't get me wrong, I know it's not always that easy, and there's obviously extreme circumstances that you're definitely not going to look back at and think, oh, I missed that time. Nor are you just going to be able to just love all your problems in those kind of circumstances. But I couldn't deny that a lot of the time, that just wasn't the case for me. The time passed by, and when I look back, I feel like I wasted it. But Suga isn't going to feel that way for a second, because he's done everything he can to make the most of every second on the court. Not just in terms of his training, but mentally. He tells Ukai that no matter what the circumstances, he just wants whatever time on the court he can get, because it would just be silly to let things like that ruin his experience. And Ukai seems to have the same realization I did, that he didn't do the same, and that it just doesn't make sense to get caught up on, I only got to play this much, I only when someone Kageyama was injured. He may look back and wish he got to play more, but if he doesn't even make the most of the time he does get, he'll definitely regret that. And if he wants to keep playing more volleyball later on, no doubt the opportunity will be there for him. Of course, that doesn't change the fact that it's still so bittersweet to see his thought process as he realizes he's about to be subbed off. Let me stay here. Let me keep playing. Let me be the one to put the ball up. He's not saying that to Ukai or to anyone. He just has this silent, strong desire to want to play more. But somehow it feels like he's not so much sad about it ending as he is hopefully gets another chance. And honestly, I think he realizes how beautifully lucky he is to have something that moves him so much, that consumes him and makes him want to do anything for even a second more, because how many people never experience that? They never experience something that moves their very soul. Maybe that's you. And if it is, be ready to appreciate every single second when you find it, because while Suga's time on the court is limited, so is everyone's. Unless you manage to make it a full-time job, you're going to have other responsibilities, other work that comes up that limits how much you get to do what you love. Even if you do become a pro, one day you'll have to retire. Everyone's time is limited, and only the lucky few make the most of it, fully appreciate it. And so as Suga gets his final play of the game, Asahi promises to make it count. And as he smashes past the block, Suga walks off with a smile. Ukai praises him for holding his own against Oikawa and inadvertently makes Suga extremely happy as he says, next time, use the center more. Next time, he'll get another chance. Moving ahead, Karasuno unfortunately loses this match, leaving Suga and the other third years a choice to make. Will they play in the spring tournament or leave the club to give them more time to focus on their exams? Of course, if they do leave, their defeat to Aoba Johsai will be the last game they ever played at high school. The school advisors heavily tried to discourage Sugawara in particular, as he's not even on the starting team, yet it's potentially jeopardizing his chances at college for it. And by the way, my advice on this is just to stay on the damn sports team, because as long as you don't overdo it and you use your time outside of it wisely, your grades will be fine and you'll regret leaving it. But anyway, the other advisor isn't necessarily wrong, thus Suga won't get any material benefit, but that's not why he plays this game. And meanwhile, Takada tells Hinata the third years need to make the decision they won't regret. And again, he's right when he says no one will know what that is until the time comes. But Suga already knows that every second he can get on the court is completely worth the days and weeks that went into standing there. Throughout the rest of the series, he's subbed in as a pinch server when needed, as he's shown to have a particularly reliable, accurate serve that can be used to bring the opposing ace to one knee. He subbed in most games from here on out, even if only briefly. In fact, I believe it's every game except the very first one at Spring Qualifiers and the Waku South game. And whilst it does slightly break my heart to see him on the sidelines so often, I know that he's living in a way that will keep him very happy for the rest of his life. He might have only been a good setter, but Sugawara is an incredible character. Thank you very much for watching. Like all the Haikyuu characters I've covered so far, I've only done up to where the anime ends, and that's because I think the rest of the series deserves separate videos. But do let me know who else you'd like to see in the meantime. Thanks again for watching, and see you again soon.